when you do that, when you can control what people can imagine, you can control them.
Science fiction is definitely having a moment. From Dune to Project Hail Mary to Steven Spielberg's sci-fi epic Disclosure Day, audiences can't seem to get enough of stories about the future. But what is it about sci-fi that continues to captivate audiences across generations? Today, I'm here at Back of Phoenix, Canada's oldest sci-fi and fantasy bookstore, to find out why.
Hi, everyone. I am Chinelo Onwualu. I am a writer and editor of science fiction and fantasy. I am also a sales associate here at Back of Phoenix Books, which is the oldest long-running science fiction and fantasy bookstore in North America for sure. Yeah, and this stuff is my life. I write it, I teach it. It is what I'm passionate about, and I'm so happy to introduce it to you guys. Science fiction has to at least have some basis in scientific principle, that either it is pushed towards its most extreme end or it is reimagined in some way. So the idea of like faster than light travel may not be something that's possible right now, given our current technology and understanding. But science fiction can say, what if we discovered a way to fold space like in a quantum way and then travel through it? So these are all things that take like existing scientific principles and then play with them for world building. Knowing that what inspired the cell phone as we understand it were tricorders from Star Trek. Like the idea that you could have a handheld device that you could then use to communicate with each other. That somebody looked at Star Trek and went, we should make that in real life. We should totally do that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it actually has these like real world implications. And I think that that's why when we start to expand our understanding of the genre, we are doing more than just representing. What we're saying is we're expanding our understanding of reality itself. So some classic sci-fi from like the 30s and 40s would have these all white worlds and have these all male stories, right? Reading those kinds of narratives as somebody who's neither white nor male, you start asking, what happened to all the people of color? Do you know what I mean? And the answer is usually not great if you think about it. So when you start expanding what our future itself can look like, you actually redefine what reality is for ourselves in the present. So one thing that I often challenge, because I teach creative writing at the U of T School of Continuing Studies. So I do a short story course there. And one of the things I always try to challenge people to think about when they're doing their world building is, what are the inbuilt, baked in assumptions that you have about the world that you're recreating and replicating in this imaginative space? So technically the imagination is infinite, right? When you dream up, you don't have any limitations, except you do, because the world that you're raised in, the water that you swim in, all of that gets into your head and defines what can be and what could not be. So how many space monarchies have we seen that have inherently patriarchal structures where the crown must be passed from father to son, and so we have to go out into the universe to look for the chosen boy? Do you know what I mean? How many ideas about gerontocracy does that embed in it? What ideas about patriarchy? What ideas about eugenics? Because the idea is that by virtue of having been born to these people, you're somehow more special than everybody else. What does that carry within it? And so when we take these things without critical analysis, or even without challenge of alternative ways of building our worlds, what are we carrying into these spaces and saying that we don't get to question them because they just are? One of the things that I love about science fiction and about speculative fiction as a whole is that by finessing everything else in the story, the science, the world building, the climate, all of that, you actually get to tell a more emotionally authentic story, because that is the one thing you can't fake. And sometimes I think you can hide emotional insincerity in certain other genres just because it happens to be very realistic. You can make characters do things that a real character wouldn't do, but well, it's realistic. Everything's realistic, so you can hide behind that. You can't do that with speculative fiction.
I think we've established this is a genre for anybody. But why is it particularly right now? It seems young people are loving this. I could say the same for horror. They're going out to horror. Sci-fi is definitely in the mix too. What do you think it is?
I think the appeal is twofold. One, the reduction of stigma. So young people today are not being stigmatized in the same way as maybe older generations were for their love for the genre, right? Young people can talk enthusiastically about really getting into, a romance where the two people involved are dragons, and they don't have to hide the cover of the book, right, on the subreddit. Whereas I remember when I was growing up, one of my first exposures to the genre was Robert Jordan. And when I was borrowing it from the library, I got some looks. I was like, so this is what you're reading. And you're not reading your textbooks, you're reading this nonsense. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that's a big part of it, is the reduction of stigma. The other part of it, I think, is that we are in a reality that's not super great for young people. I'm an elder millennial, and I grew up in a world that assumed that my life was going to be better than my parents, that I was going to have better opportunities, I was going to have a better education, that I was going to be wealthier, and for me, seeing that those promises did not automatically come true has been sort of a reset. But we're talking about millennials and Gen Z, and even maybe Gen Alpha, but they're still babies right now, who don't even have that expectation of things are going to get better for us. There's no expectation that, of course, if you just work hard enough, you'll get a house. Of course, if you just work hard enough, you'll get a stable job that will pay you to retirement. That's just not something that happened for them, and nothing that they expect to happen. And so sometimes that you need that escape from a sense of like relentless, I don't want to say depression, but just a sense of like, if you're not careful, you can fall into that sense that nothing matters. Why should I bother? And I think that one of the things that science fiction does really, really well is that it continues to give us a sense of, it continues to premise that no matter how bad things get, one plucky teenager can take down the whole system. No matter how awful and dystopian things become, a band of like ragtag found family can like change the kingdom. And it's a way of reminding ourselves that things can change, that there's possibility, that there's hope, even if that hope resides in between the pages of the book. There's a reason why authoritarians, fascists, and people who are trying to create these control hierarchies immediately go after books. They go after imagination. They go after women. They go after the marginalized, because those are the spaces where change happens. Those are the people who have less to lose. Those are the ones that make the most noise. When you start reading books, you come out of it and start asking questions. You start saying, but why? But really? You know what I mean? And authoritarians hate that. That's why, you have this like real attack on like queer stories. That's why, anti-trans legislation is trying to strip away representation, because when you do that, when you can control what people can imagine, you can control them. That's why people didn't want slaves to read. Because if you start expanding your mind, if you start exposing yourself to new ideas, you start shaking things up. Just by virtue of having been exposed. They say that the mind, once expanded, cannot be turned to Jesus. And that is what the struggle is, to keep your mind contained, to keep your imagination small, so you never, ever try to change. What we're seeing in Hollywood, at least, is this sort of pulling back on stories that feature diverse characters, because the manosphere is so loud. And that's not that it's representative of the vast majority of people watching. It's just that it has captured the megaphone. In some ways, you have social media platforms that are algorithmically tilted towards these minority ragey voices, and it rewards them. It rewards these minority loudmouths and gives them more credence than they actually have. And so what you're seeing is, in some ways, a pulling back and a contraction of, and you see this all. You're seeing this all over. So one of my other things that I do to pay rent is to I used to work for a lot of human rights organizations, primarily out of West Africa. And as this is happening, this contraction of rights and representation and this entrenchment that you're seeing of like the billionaire class, and using extremism, both religious on every level. There's religious extremism on the rise. But I don't believe that it represents the vast majority of people. I believe that what we're seeing is a power class that is scared to death, that is scared of losing power, of relevance, that has started to see its hegemonic control erode at the edges. And you know what happens with powerful people? Once they start losing even a little bit, they react. They go big, they blow up. That is not to say that is an indication that they're winning. It's actually an indication that they're losing. It's actually an indication that they are scared as hell. And so what you're seeing is, in these official spaces, a contraction that is not a reflection of what the actual that's thinking and doing. So even as these power structures try to consolidate and try to keep hold of the status quo, the ground is crumbling beneath them. That's why they're panicking. That's why they're going big. That's why they're pouring money into, algorithms and AI, and trying to convince all of us that AI is inevitable. It's just going to happen. Just lie down and take it, which it's not. Nothing is inevitable. And I believe that when it comes to what we're seeing today, these are growing pains. These are growing pains. And sometimes we have to see things get really, really bad for us to want better for ourselves. We have to see the things that we think are inviolate, the things that we think are inevitable, actually crumble, for us to go, oh, we can do things differently. I'm betting my house. I'm betting the house on a better future. I'm betting a house on a future that is so much better than what we have today.